Alright guys, welcome to another video. This is the fourth video in our OAuth2 Discord implementation from scratch series. So in the last video, I showed you guys how to pretty much save the session to the database. I also showed you guys how to restore the session. And pretty much that happens during the deserialization process. What we're going to do is we're going to finish up with migrating all of the code from the first episode into our latest changes, into our latest structure. You can see that we have already implemented the redirect, so we can actually just get rid of this. We need to implement, let's see, we can also get rid of the user as well because we were implementing that already. We also need to implement the revoke endpoint, so we should probably take care of that first before we proceed. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So right now, let's see. In the revoke access token controller, what we should do is we basically need to get the access token and we need to revoke it. Now remember, we actually have the access token saved in the database, but right now the problem here is that the access token and the refresh token are actually saved in the database the way it is, and we probably should not do that because if there is some kind of database breach, let's say if a hacker gets into your database, which, you know, there are some ways that you can actually protect your database. The first step is to making sure that you disable remote logins, okay? But let's say, for example, your database gets hacked, and the attacker sees all of these access tokens and refresh tokens. It makes their job easier to use those credentials and make requests on behalf of users. Okay, now obviously there's many steps that you can take to protect these credentials. The first step obviously is to making sure that you do things such as hashing or encrypting. If it's a password, you definitely want to hash that. But when it comes to access and refresh tokens, the way that I would personally recommend you handle this is by encrypting it. And encrypting is different than hashing because when you hash something, there's no way that you can actually reverse the hash and get the original value back. So once you hash, so for example, it's a good thing to hash passwords because when you hash password, you cannot actually get the original password back from the hash. Okay, the way that you can actually validate the user is you have the user re-enter their password in when they log in, and the password is sent to the server. The server hashes the password the user sent, and if those hashes match, then the user is authenticated. They provide the correct password. Okay, and if the hashes don't match, then it's the incorrect password they provided. However, when it comes to encryption and decryption, you can always get the original value back by decrypting the value. Okay, we're gonna use a library to encrypt and decrypt our value, and this is actually going to require us to have we're going to actually have to specify an algorithm that we're going to use, and we're going to also have to specify a secret. I think that's what it's called, a encryption secret. I'm not much of a cryptologist, or I'm not too familiar with cryptology. I just know like a very surface level of it because I've done it before. But I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to do it, and if you guys have any better recommendations, we can always improve the code. But that's just going to be pretty much the gist of this whole video. We're going to take care of encrypting and decrypting, and then we're going to take care of revoking the access token. All right, now there are many different libraries out there that exist for encrypting and decrypting. Node.js does have a default crypto module that you could use, but it does require to do a bunch of other additional things. I would recommend probably using a library that wraps around those things. So that way you don't have to worry so much about it. So I guess what we'll do is we'll probably just install this crypto.js module, and we can just follow the API and do exactly what it is that we can do. So ideally, we need the data that we want to encrypt, and we also need a key. And the key is something that we'll have to obviously keep secret. So it'd be pretty bad if the attacker had the key as well, because if they have the decrypted values, they can't really do anything with that unless they had the key to decrypt that. Okay, or I should have said encrypt the values. So if they have the key to decrypt the encrypted values, then obviously that would be bad. Okay, so what we could do is we can install this package and we can just follow the documentation. And they have different algorithms that you can use. So I think we'll just probably use a simple one. So we won't really go too crazy with this. Like I said, the whole point is just to encrypt, decrypt. I'll let you guys take care of doing the research on what you think is better. But we'll just do a simple version. So let's go ahead and install crypto.js. So let's do yarn add crypto.js. I think that's the correct one. Yep, crypto-js. So let's install that. And what we'll do is we want to create a function that's going to take care of that for us. So we're not going to just directly import that in the controller or the service. So we'll do import. Let's see. I think we'll do AES. So let's do import. Well, actually, let's just do crypto.js. Crypto.js from crypto.js. And I think we also need to install the types file as well, or the typings. So let's do that. So at types crypto.js. So there we go. Okay, and now we can create a function, and we'll just call this export const, or let's call this let's see, yeah, export const encrypt token. And I'm not sure if we need to make this async or not, but we'll have to see based on the documentation. So what we could do is we can call crypto.js.aes.encrypt, and we have the message. So I'm assuming that's just the value that we want to encrypt, and then we have the key. So the key is something that we'll obviously have to keep secret. So I think what we'll do is we'll put that in an environment variable. So I have a .env file, but and it has this template. I actually did put that inside the README. So you guys can just copy all this stuff and put that inside your own .env file. It's because I don't have the .env file staged and committed to Git, so you guys have to put that yourself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just create a secret, and we'll just call this okay, and what we'll do is we'll simply just do something like, I don't know, random value. Okay. And like I said, this is a secret that you'd probably want to store somewhere secure on the server. Basically, if the hacker were to see like the encrypt secret, they can use that to decrypt everything. So maybe some best ways is you can store it on the server. You can maybe store it on a different server, make an API call to get the secret. I'll let you guys decide on what you think is best. Okay, but what we'll do is we will get that from the environment variable. So let's just get that, and we'll pass it in there. So it's going to say that undefined is not assignable to type, blah, blah, blah. So I'll just use an exclamation mark to just do that because we know what's going on. So I think this is a synchronous operation, so we don't have to even actually worry about anything else. So it should actually just return the value. And like I said, I don't recall using this library before, so I can't really exactly tell you what is returned. But we can see for ourselves. So we'll need an encrypt token, and then we'll need a decrypt token. So right now what I'll do is I'll call this encrypt token, and we'll encrypt everything. And we'll have to encrypt before we save the user to the database. So what I'll do is let me go and call, let's see, encrypt token, and we'll pass in credentials.access token. And let's go ahead and see what is returned. So let's see. So I'll just console log encrypted, and it should just be an object, but like I said, we'll play around with it and see what we can find out. All right, so we're gonna go and authorize. So let's go over here and let's click on authorize. And if we look in the logs, we should see a bunch of stuff. So let's see, we can see all of the necessary data that we might need, but I think what we want is we want the actual encrypted value. And based on the documentation, we can actually, we should actually just be able to call toString. Let's see. And like I said, there's many ways that you can actually get the value. I think you can get it as base64, but it's totally, like I said, it's totally up to you on how you want to encrypt it. There's many different libraries that do literally whatever you want, but I think for here, we will just call toString. So let's see, encrypted.toString. Okay, and let's go ahead and reauthorize again. And you can see that this is the value over here. Let's try to reauthorize again. Let's see. Okay, so it gives a different value every single time it's encrypted. Okay, now let's actually try something else. What I'm going to do, and let me just make sure. Before we save anything, I want to actually make sure that if we encrypt this as well, it'll give us back the actual original value. It's always good to double check, okay? So we'll create a function called Decrypt Token, and we'll literally just use the decrypt. And like I say, decrypting is just the reverse of encrypting. So we pass in the ciphertext. So that's just going to be, we're not going to call it token anymore. We'll just call this encrypted. That's the encrypted text. And we'll need the key again. So that'll be Encrypt Secret. Okay. And let's just double check just to make sure this actually works the way we expect it to. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and decrypt the token. So const decrypted equals decrypt token. And we're going to pass encrypted.toString. And this should give us the decrypted value. So console log decrypted.toString. And we might need to pass the encoder. So I'll double check that in a second. So let's see. So that went well. And yeah, so I think this is in a different encoding. I'm not sure what it returns by default. I think by default, yeah, it says hex. So we should pass in, let's see, crypto. So I need to import crypto. Yes, from crypto.js. And we're going to go ahead and pass in crypto.js.enc for encoding. And it says UTF-8 is what the documentation has. So we'll test that out. So we're going to click authorize and let's check the logs. So you can see that the original value is logged over here. We encrypt the original value, the original access token, and this is the encrypted value. And then when we decrypt it and then get it in UTF-8, it gives us back the original access token, which is good. Now, obviously over here, you're going to see that the access and the refresh token are different. The reason why is because actually when I finished recording my previous videos, I actually revoked access on my Discord account. So that's why when I reauthorize again, it gives you a new pair of access and refresh tokens. Okay, but essentially, like I said before, when we have the user reauthorize again, we want to make sure that every single time they authorize, we update the necessary details that we need to update. Okay, so part of them could be the access token. So we could just include that as part of the process of updating the user. Okay. So what we'll do is right now inside this auth controller, we are encrypting and decrypting the token. Now let me actually just get rid of these logs and we'll actually move this into a different function. Like I said before, we don't want to do everything inside the controller. It's really just responsible for controlling the request. Things like saving stuff to the database, making API calls, that should be done at the service layer. So we're going to go into the services file and we're going to create a function and we can just simply create a function that is responsible for encrypting the tokens. And what's going to happen is it's going to return the necessary tokens, but encrypt this time. Okay, and we're going to pass those down to the create user function. So it seems like the create user function. Let's see, the create user function takes in this build user. So we're actually going to need to modify build user. So instead of actually passing in credentials, we'll actually create a new type that has the encrypted values, and then we'll save that to the database instead. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go inside services. So let's see. We'll create a function called encrypt tokens. And this function will take in an access token and a refresh token. So just two values, so we'll just put them as individual strings, okay? And we're literally just going to call the functions encrypt token, and we're just going to call it encrypt token. So we can actually just return, let's see. Let me actually do this. Access underscore token, refresh underscore token. Well, actually, wait, I don't need to do that because we're returning an object. So access token. And what we'll do is we'll call the encrypt token function that we created. And it's literally just a wrapper. You honestly don't even need that function, but I mean, it's completely fine. We'll just leave it like this for now. Okay, so we'll call encrypt token on that, and then we will call refresh token, or we'll call encrypt token for the refresh token as well. Okay, so this is encrypt tokens, and this is an asynchronous function, or a synchronous function rather. And it's going to give us, we should call it toString. Sorry about that. Yep. Okay. And remember, when we decrypt, we're going to need to make sure we specify the encoding as well. So we'll make sure we do that. So right now, let's go ahead and remove this that we had from earlier. And essentially, we're going to have to modify the build user function because that's what actually takes in the original access and refresh token. But this time, we're going to need to pass in, our own type. So I'll create a custom type, and I'll just call this encrypted tokens. And it'll just literally be access token, which is a string, and then refresh token, which is also a string. And we'll specify the return type of this function to be an encrypted tokens type. Okay. So when we go ahead and call, let's see, what are we going to do? Let's see. I think what I'll do is I'll call const tokens equals encrypt tokens. We're going to the access token, so credentials dot access token, credentials dot refresh token. Okay. You know what? Let me actually destructure this, I guess. Because I guess we do need to reuse them over and over again, so I can just delete this, and delete this, and delete this. There we go. Okay, so this should give us back an encrypted tokens type, or an object that is of type encrypted tokens. And for the build user, we'll modify the credentials instead to be encrypted tokens. So now it'll actually just be credentials.access token and credentials.refresh token. And we'll need to pass in tokens this way. Okay, so this should create a new user. And let's actually, before we do anything else, let's make sure that the logic works anyway. So in create user, it's going to find the user. If the user is found, we're going to update the user. Right now, we're not updating the access and refresh tokens. We should. So I think what we can do is we'll just do user dot access token, and we do need to update the credentials. So I think for params, let's see. So params, what did I do params for? Params also has an access token, refresh token, and that gets, I think build user returns create user params. Okay, so that should have the encrypted values. Good. So we can just do user dot access token equals params dot access token, user dot refresh token equals params dot refresh token, and this should always override the current access and refresh tokens with the updated ones. And this is actually good because if the user, like I said, if the user reauthenticates, they might actually get a new access and refresh token. Okay, let's say if they deauthorize the app and they reauthorize the app again, we're going to want to make sure we update the access token. Okay, so that's good. And that's actually something that I forgot to do in the previous video. So it's a good thing that we're catching this situation right now. So we update the access and refresh tokens. That's good. And I think that should be it. So let's go ahead and test everything out. So if we reauthorize again, we should see the encrypted values. Now, obviously, you don't want to send this to the user. So you should avoid, because anything that's sensitive, you should avoid sending to the client. Okay. But you can obviously write some kind of middleware that removes these values or hides them from the from the user. You can also, with type ORM, you can also actually exclude values from being selected, I think. So we'll figure that out. But yeah, like I said, just make sure you don't send the access token and refresh token. Okay, now let's actually make sure. Let's see. So it's being saved, which is good. Now let me go into my Discord settings, and let me go ahead and go and deauthorize the value. Okay, or deauthorize the app. So if I authorize again, it should give us a new access token and refresh token. Let me actually save this so I can remember what the values were. Whoops. Okay, so if I authorize again, it should be the same encrypted and decrypted values. Or actually, no, it's not going to be. So it's actually going to re-encrypt it's actually going to re-encrypt the values over and over again. It might actually slow down your application because I know encryption and decryption could take some time. But yeah, right now it's actually going to encrypt and decrypt every single time. Because remember, it's going to encrypt and decrypt. Because since every single time the user authorizes, is going to encrypt the tokens again, which I guess that could be good in a sense that you don't have like outdated values. But I don't really think it makes much of a difference because if a hacker sees it, they can always just they see anyways, right? But let's go ahead and do this. So we have the encrypted values. Now let's create a function real quick. Or actually, let's do this. So what we're gonna do is if we want to actually get the user, like the actual Discord user, not from our database, from the user itself, let's go ahead and do this. We're gonna do 2 steps. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. So we have the user route that we created from the second episode. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to take care of decrypting and making the API call to Discord to get the actual user. So what we'll do is we'll create another folder. We'll call this users. I'll call it user. And I'll call this index.ts. And for this, I'll just create a async function. Get Discord user. Okay. And this is going to have, let's see, it's going to have the request and response object. And let's see, we'll check to see if breakout user exists. If it does, then we know that they are authenticated. If they're not authenticated, we'll send a 401. And let's go back to the user route and let's get rid of this anonymous function, and we're going to pass in the get Discord user. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create another folder inside services for user, and this is literally going to take care of all of the user services. So for example, we're going to want to fetch the Discord user, so async function fetch Discord user. And we're going to need a couple things. Obviously, we're going to need to get the access token. I think that's all we really need is just the access token. So what we'll do here is we're actually going to have to do a couple things. One, we need to decrypt the token. 2, we need to get the token as well. We'll get the decrypted token. So we have to do a couple things. One, we need to get the actual decrypt token. Or we need the actual encrypted token. We got to decrypt that and then use that to make the API call. Okay, so I think what we'll do is, let's see, rec.user should have the access token. So if the user exists, what we'll do is I'll destructure the access token from rec.user. We're going to go ahead and pass in the access token over here inside fetch Discord user. Because that's really all we really need. So we'll do const Discord user equals await fetch Discord user, pass in that access token, and we'll have to decrypt this. So let's do const decrypted token, or let's call it decrypted token equals decrypt token. You're gonna pass in the access token, and then we're gonna call toString crypto as.enc.utf. And it'll just be the UTF-8 encoding. So the Decrypt token should work fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and visit the user route now. So we're going to go to /API/user/profile. So /API/user/profile. So it's giving us an error. So it's in crypto.js not defined. Okay, seems like we actually need to import that. Crypto.js. There we go. So that should fix that. Okay, so let's see. Function decrypt token. Oh, whoops, it's decrypt the token. Okay, there we go. So that should be the correct token. So yeah, that's the decrypted value. I'm not too sure what the original value was, but yeah, that is the decrypted value, seems like. And we can just make an API call now. So over here for fetch Discord user, we're going to return axios.get, and we're going to call the OAuth2 user route. And for the config, we'll do, and like I said, these are variables that we created in episode 2. Okay. For the, let's see, we need to pass in the auth headers, so we'll do that. So auth headers is a function, and we'll pass in the access token, well, the decrypted access token. Okay, and this should return the Discord user, and I think we created a type for that as well. Discord OAuth2 user response. So we'll type annotate that. Discord OAuth2 user response. Just so that we get IntelliSense wherever we call this. So now Discord user, I should be able to have all the properties show up in IntelliSense, okay? And we will simply just, let's see, user, we'll destructure that and rename it as user. And we will send that back. And if there's an error, actually we'll wrap into try catch soon, but let me do this real quick. So right now I'm going to go ahead and go to /auth user, so that's good. But now let's go to /user/profile, and there we go. So that access token actually works, which is good. So we decrypted the value, and then we use that to make the API call, which is good. Okay, you never want to save the actual raw access and refresh tokens or any sensitive data in your database. Okay, and there we go. So it's making the API call successfully. Let me do one more thing. Let me do this. If there's no user, we will return a 401. So that way what I can do here is I can wrap everything in a try catch. So any errors that happen when fetching the Discord user will be caught over here. And we can just send a, I guess we could send a 400 status. Okay, but we can also send the status based on whatever Axios gives us. So it could either be a 403 from Discord, but we'll handle that later. Okay, so yeah, it's a good thing we are handling errors. And yeah, that's pretty much how we can encrypt and decrypt the token. Now that we know how to encrypt and decrypt tokens, let's do one more thing, and this is actually what I wanted to do earlier, but I got a little bit sidetracked. What I want to do now is I want to revoke the access token. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go inside, let's see, so let me go back to the main route real quick, or the main index.ts file. And we want to implement this revoke route that we had from the first video. And the revoke route literally just needs the access token. We don't need anything else that's having the access token. Well, we need the secret and the client, the client secret and the client ID, but we need the access token. And this is the original value, not the encrypted one. Okay. So we're gonna go into auth, and remember this revoke endpoint that we created. We're gonna have to implement that now. So over here, the revoke access token controller is going to do a couple things. It's going to call its appropriate service function. So we'll create that over here. So all it's going to do is we're going to call this Revoke Token. And I think revoking the access token should also revoke the refresh token by default, so we don't have to do anything else aside from just calling the endpoint and passing in the access token. Okay, so the revoke token function, we can just easily take in the access token, well, the decrypted access token. We can get the decrypted token. So let's call Decrypt Token, pass in the access token. And we need the crypto.js encoding to be UTF-8. So I think we have crypto.js imported. Oh, we don't. So let's import that real quick before it throws another error. Okay, so this is the Decrypt the Token. And like I said, like always, before I do anything else, let's make sure that we are testing everything as we're going. So if there's no user, we will just send back a status of 401. Good. And what we'll do next is we'll simply call our service function. So we'll call Revoke Token. And we're going to pass in the access token. Okay. And we know at this point the user will be defined. Okay. And once we pass this in here, let's actually just console log decrypt the token. So instead of us just doing everything, writing all the code all at once, let's test it out one by one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call the revoke endpoint and make sure that the correct function is being called. So that's going to be /API/auth/revoke. So it's not going to send a response back, but we want to make sure that that token is being logged, which seems like that is, which is good. So now that we know that it's calling this revoke token function, now all we got to do is literally just call the endpoint the same way that we did it in the first episode. So we have the code over here. So we're going to need to get the form data. So const form data equals new URL. URL search params, and we're going to need to import URL up top over here. So let's do that. So import URL from URL. And what we'll do is we'll pass in the client ID, and that's going to be given from the environment variable. Seems like we did not destructure that. So what I'll do is I'll just do process.env Discord OAuth client ID. Okay. Let's see. Seems like we'll just do that. Client underscore secrets. And we'll just copy that as well. And last but not least, the token will be decrypted token, just like that. And now that it is like that, we can easily just call axios.post. We can pass in the revoke endpoint. So let me actually put that in the enum that we created from earlier. Should be over here. OAuth2 token revoke. Cool. So Discord API routes, reference that. And that's going to basically call this endpoint over here. And let's see, is there anything else that we need to do? So we do need to pass in the data, but we're going to pass in form data.toString, like so. And for the headers, we already have the headers defined in the constants over here, axios config, so we can reuse that. So axios config, and that's it. We don't need to pass anything else. And this, if I remember correctly, this endpoint, if successful, it will return a 200 status code with an empty object. So there's really nothing else that we really need to worry about. So when we call revoke token, I think, yeah, let's try that. So let's do, everything should be okay. If there's any errors, it should throw an error. And we'll just send a status of 400. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's try to call this endpoint now. So if I refresh, right now, it seems like it's returning okay. If I refresh again, it seems like it's it's capable of actually, it seems like it's actually able to get that. It seems like it's able to call that endpoint every single time, but it's not throwing an error though, even though we had already invalidated the token. Okay. But let's actually see what happens if we try to, so the other route should work fine. But if I try to go to that user profile route, it's going to send bad requests, right? And the reason why is because, remember, we deauthorized the token, so it's not able to make API requests on behalf of the user directly to the Discord API. And you can see right over here, it actually logs message 401 unauthorized, which is exactly what we want. So it seems like it won't throw an error if we pass in an already invalidated access token. But so it'll always send a 200. Now I'm not sure if at some point it will send a 400. I'm not sure how it works underneath the hood, like with the Discord API. Yeah, my guess would probably be they probably take the token and put in like some kind of database, and they note that token as invalidated, but you can keep on making requests to the revoke endpoint, and you can keep on revoking it, but it doesn't really do anything. That's my guess, and I think after some time, if you try to use it, it won't actually work. I wonder if you actually, let me actually see one more thing. I wonder if you actually pass in like an invalid string like this, and I wonder what happens if you do that. So let's try going to auth revoke. Seems like it still gives an okay. So I'm not, again, like I said, I'm not too sure, but if anyone knows, please leave a comment down below and let me know. Okay, and that's pretty much it with revoking access. And you can see that we tried accessing the user endpoint. And remember, this user endpoint directly calls the Discord API and returns the user. But since we already deauthorized everything, it's not going to work. And the only way that this endpoint is going to work is if we reauthorize the user again. So let's try that. So that way we understand how the whole flow of our application works. So we're going to reauthorize. Okay, good. The access token, refresh token should have been updated. Okay. Now, if I try to go to the auth/user, that should be fine. If I go to, let's see, API/user profile. So that's going to call it with the new access token. Good. And if I go to /auth/revoke, okay. And if I try to go to the user endpoint again, bad request, exactly what we want. Okay, and now it'd be better if we send like a 401 maybe, or like a 403, indicating the user needs to reauthorize. But again, I'll let you guys handle that situation. So yeah, that's pretty much how you would revoke the access token. Now, the last thing that we are not going to do, or at least we're not going to create an endpoint for, is refreshing the token. Refreshing the token should be done without actually exposing any, function or any API or any endpoint to the user. The way that I would recommend you refresh token is, what you could do is you can actually make a request to Discord with the access token. You can actually try to refresh a token and see if it works. I think if the refresh token is invalid, it should return like a 403 or like a 400 status. I'm not too sure. But what you can do is you can try to refresh the token. If it returns an invalid request, then you know that the user actually needs to reauthorize the app again. If it returns successful, then you know that the refresh worked. So that means that the user actually never revoked the access with the access token. Okay. It could have just been that the access token was expired, but it was never revoked. Okay. Okay, so the last thing that we can do is we can implement refreshing the token. Now this one, you're gonna have to do whenever the user's access token expires. Now, there's many ways that you can do this. You can either set up some kind of cron job and see when access tokens expire, but I would not recommend that because, again, you might have users that sign up for your application one time and they never use it again. So it'd be pointless to refresh their token because they might not even use the application anymore, and that's going to take up resources on your server. So what I would recommend is whenever the user is using your application, what can happen is you can always do a check, right? Let's say, for example, if the user's access token, if it doesn't work, what you can do is you can make one attempt to refresh the token. If the refreshing of the token does not work, then then you know that the user actually either revoked access, either through your platform or manually through Discord. So you'll have to get them to reauthorize again. Okay, so this one could be a little bit tricky, but it's based on how you want to implement it, right? Because there's different scenarios. So let's say, for example, if the access token expires, right? Like I said, the cron job, where you schedule jobs and refresh token, I don't think that'd be a good idea. Okay, I think the best way to do this is to allow the user to make requests. If the request sends back a 200 status, if the request sends back a 200 status code, then good, you don't have to do anything. If the request sends back a 400 or like a 403, then you, or I think, I'm not sure what, I think it's 403 if the access token is invalid. All right, well, I think the last thing that we're missing is refreshing the token. But I think what I want to mention regarding refreshing the token is that it can actually be a little bit tricky because let's say, for example, the user authorizes, and let's just say they decide to manually revoke access from your application. So I don't think there's a way that you can actually know or get notified whenever a user revokes access. I don't think there's any event that is, or any webhook. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe there might be, but I don't recall there being one. So if the user were to manually revoke access through Discord, like on the Discord application, not your platform, the Discord platform, okay, then you wouldn't be able to use the access token or the refresh token. Those would be invalidated. Okay, so if the user, did do that, then you wouldn't be able to make any requests. Now, obviously, that doesn't really quite it's not really a huge important thing because if the user revokes access, well, in order for them to visit your website, they're going to need to obviously authorize. So even when they authorize, it's going to grant your application permission again. So that's something that you don't have to worry too much about, and it's not like you're exposing, or at least you should not expose your APIs to users that are not logged in. So again, if they were to revoke access completely through the Discord app, it wouldn't really be such a big issue unless unless your application needed to make API calls on behalf of the user, then that would be a problem. Even if they deauthorize the app, then that would be a problem. But if you're not making API calls, even when the user chooses to deauthorize, then it's not going to be something that you have to worry about, right? So there's that one scenario. Another scenario would be, let's say if they are authenticated, but their access token and refresh token expires, or the access token expires, right? So what do you do there? And you don't want the user to re-log in again. So, and a cheap way to solve this is what you can do is you can actually just expire the cookie very shortly, because if you know how long the access token is going to be valid for, then you can just expire the cookie like a day or a couple hours before, so that way the user doesn't have to you don't have to worry about refreshing it. So that's one way, but obviously that's not really something that a lot of people would want to do. Another thing that you could do is, let's say if the user's access token does expire and you want to make API calls, the user still wants to use the platform and they don't want to re-authenticate again. They've already authenticated once or authorized once. They don't want to do it again. So what would you do in this situation? Well, what you would do is, with every single API call that you make to Discord, you'd probably have to make an additional one. At least that's what I would do. So what you can do is you can actually call any of the valid endpoints with the OAuth2 access token. But you also have to make sure that you're calling the correct one, because if you call, let's say for example, if you try to call the guilds endpoint to get the guilds, but you don't have the guild scope, it's obviously going to fail. So if, let's say for example, if your application has identify, you can use the endpoint, the /users at me endpoint, to check to see if the token for that user works. Now there's a couple of problems when it comes to refreshing the token, because you won't exactly know if the user manually revoked access or if the token actually expired. And that situation occurs, let's say, for example, if the user never deauthorized themselves, they never revoked access, but the token expired, let's say 1 week later is when the request you're trying to make, right? So the token has expired a week ago, and you won't exactly know if the user has manually revoked access or if the token itself just doesn't work because it expired. I mean, obviously, you know that the token expired, okay, but you won't know if they actually are still authorizing the application. So if they are not authorizing your platform with the application, then making the API call to refresh the token will not work. Okay, the only situation where you can actually get this to succeed without it failing twice, because what I'm suggesting is you make one API call initially. If that API call fails, you can check to see if the access token has already been expired. But even if you check if it's been expired, that doesn't mean that that refresh token call will actually succeed, because like I said, the user could have revoked access already. Okay, but you can call the refresh token API. You can call the endpoint, attempt to refresh the token. If it fails again, if it gives you a 401 or a 400, whatever like error status code, then you know that the user actually deauthorized themselves. Okay, or it could be the refresh token may have expired. Okay, so I do want to mention that because the refreshing mechanism can actually be a little bit tricky, and because of that, I'm not going to do that in this tutorial. I just wanted to I guess explain the whole theory and how the system would work. And I encourage you guys to try that out yourselves and do whatever it is that you need to do to satisfy your project's needs. Just because I don't want to do only one single way, because I know there's many people who have their own methods on how they want to handle refreshing token and handle when the user deauthorize themselves from the application. Okay, and even if they revoked access access with your application, it won't really matter too much, because even if they wanted to use your platform, again, assuming that your platform only allows users who are authenticated, they're still going to need to go through the whole Discord authentication again in order to get access to your platform. Okay, and when they do that, it's going to save a new pair of access and refresh tokens in the database that are encrypted. Okay, so as long as you're not making, or as long as you're not trying to make requests on behalf of the user when they're like offline, like let's say if they're not even on the platform, but you're trying to make requests like behind the scenes, then obviously it's not going to work because they revoked access. But if your application does not do that, then you don't have to worry so much about you don't really have to worry so much about like, you know, doing stuff if they revoked access. You can also expire the cookie, like maybe like a day or like a couple hours or even a couple seconds before the access token expires. So that way, it's going to force the user to log in again, and that'll give them a new pair of access and refresh tokens. But yeah, if like I said, if you watch the first part of the video, I show you guys how to refresh the token. I think I did in Postman. So just do the same thing in the code. It's really the same thing, and it shouldn't be that difficult. Anyways, so hopefully that was informative for you guys. I think this is going to conclude the end of our 4-part series for Discord OAuth2, or just OAuth2 implementation in general from scratch. I really hope you guys enjoyed this mini series, and like I said, all the code will be in the description, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace out.